My kids are working.
Larger courage. Let's put it that way.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Is that working? Good morning. My name is Raisa Moroz. I'm the Programming and Education Director here at Tucson Jewish Museum and Holocaust Center. Thank you all for joining us on a rainy, windy Tucson morning. A little unusual for us. So yeah, thank you everyone again for joining us for this sort of warm up, if you like, to Tucson Festival of Books. We're going to get started in just a second here. I'll just really quickly introduce our wonderful panelists. And yeah, for folks on Zoom, my colleague Yusuf will be helping you out. We're having a little bit of some tech issues, so please bear with us. But we're trying hard to make this event accessible for everybody. And for folks in here, my colleague Martin Reichgott will be in the back. And so if you have any questions at any point, feel free to go up and ask him. Yeah, so let's get into it. So immediately to my left is Joel Waldman. So Joel is the co-host of the hit true crime podcast and book Surviving the Survivor, and an Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist who worked most recently as a Washington, D.C. based correspondent for Fox News, covering national politics from Capitol Hill. He's also worked as an investigative reporter for Fox 5 in New York City and for TV news programs in West Palm Beach, Miami, and Tucson, Arizona. He lives in Miami Beach with his wife, Ilyana, and his 3 children, Vida, Zizi, and Judah. Dr. Mimi Zieman, to Joel's left, is the author of an award-winning memoir, Tap Dancing on Everest, and a play, The Post-Row Monologues. As an OBGYN, she's also co-authored 17 editions of Managing Contraception. Her writing has appeared in USA Today, Newsweek, Miss Magazine, NBC News, Think, The Forward, and other publications. And I should also say, before I move forward, that all 3 projects, all 3 books that are mentioned here, we will have on sale at the end of the event as well. And at the far left is Raisa Moroz. Raisa is near and dear to our museum. She came to the United States through Jewish Family and Children's Services relocation program, and today she works with JFCS as the program manager for the Holocaust survivors. And so our work is extremely closely linked to the work that Raisa and Sharon, who's here in the audience somewhere, do for the Holocaust survivor. And you can find both Raisa and Sharon at the museum's booth at various points this weekend. So be on the lookout. Okay, so without too much further ado, I'm going to let all my panelists, could you all please briefly introduce yourselves, speak a little bit to your family background, please.
I'll kick off, even though I really should defer to women first, but I guess because of this seating arrangement, I will go. Thank you, first of all, to Rory and the Jewish Museum and the Holocaust Center here. It's fantastic to see this, and I spent a lot of time when I got in here just taking photos that I will promptly put out, like a lot younger people than me, on Instagram and Twitter and all that. But as Rory said, I was I started in broadcast news back in 1995. I was one of the first producers hired as MSNBC was being formed back then. News was still sort of news, and it was in conjunction with NBC, and a lot of people don't even realize Microsoft, that's the MS and NBC, and then wound up my career totally other end of the spectrum at Fox News Channel. I was sent there by Roger Ailes, covering politics in Washington, D.C., which was absolutely the least favorite thing of my entire life. And, you know, my really my only goal in life was to get to the national level of reporting, and I got there. So it is a typical story of be careful what you wish for, because it was the point of life when I was least happy, and I since left. And like everybody, pandemic happened, it was a reset, and I wanted to start a podcast because I had nothing to do, and I had a lot of good contacts in media, and said to myself, you know what, I know just the right person, and called my mother, my Jewish mother, who at the time was 82. She's a firecracker, she's a child Holocaust survivor, she's a licensed therapist, and she always has something to say. And the rest, as they say, is history. We started off just interviewing random people, and then it morphed into a true crime podcast. So I am now kind of the de facto Larry King of true crime. I do a live show every day. We have the tagline "Best Guests in True Crime," which is actually true because I work with Steve Cohen, who's a network booking producer, and so we've got FBI profilers, criminal defense attorneys, big names in the industry, and we cover the biggest cases in the country on a nightly basis. And as a result of that, I got the book deal for Surviving the Survivor, which is the same name as the podcast. That's why I'm here today. Now, I have a tendency to talk a lot, so I'll stop right now.
Hi, I'm Mimi Zieman. I also want to shout out to Dave Silver for helping to organize this, who's part of the Tucson Festival of Books. So we're so thankful to be here. I grew up in New York City. My parents came off the boat, refugees. My father was the only survivor in his family from the Holocaust in Latvia. And my book connects that with becoming the doctor and only woman on a groundbreaking Everest climb in Tibet in 1988 when I was a 25-year-old medical student. So it's a coming of age, it became a coming of age story because that was the only way I could connect these very different things. My New York experience being the daughter of a survivor and how I ended up on Everest. So being at this age of my life, I could say how and why did that young girl who started out there end up at Everest? So I had to kind of work to connect that. So it has themes of feminism, since I was the only woman on the climb, medicine, since I had to take care of a lot of issues on the mountain, adventure, taking risks. I ask, why do some people do crazy things like that and take risks, and other people want to stay closer to home and be more comfortable? And search for identity. What does it mean to be in your happy place? Because really what drove me there was the mountains where I discovered were my happy place. So thinking a lot about what that means. Career-wise, yes, I'm an OBGYN and I've pivoted a lot in my career. Started out teaching at Emory School of Medicine. My specialty is in contraceptive research. That's why I have that book, 17 editions of. I don't think I could last doing another one. And then I pivoted to become an entrepreneur and a consultant and then work in the arts, which is why I have the play in my current book. So that's who I am.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Raisa Moroz. I was born in Belarus, in former Soviet Union, in 1996. I came to the United States to Tucson, Arizona, as a refugee, and this became my home for 29 years now. My family, most of my family did not survive Holocaust or barely survive Holocaust. Out of 4 grandparents, 3 of them survived and 1 never became a grandparent. She never became a grandmother. She died when my mom was only 3.5 years old, while trying to leave the Belarus to survive, which she never survived. When I came here, I started working with Jewish Family and Children Services. It was my first job. Then I moved to Jewish Federation and came back in 2009 to work with Holocaust survivors. And this is where I really want to share with at least with Jewish community here in Tucson, stories of at the beginning just Holocaust survivors from former Soviet Union, but then I want people to know about all survivors who live in or ever lived in Tucson. Anyway, I collected 13 stories in Russian, had them on my desk for 2 years until young gentleman who just retired from Air Force came to the agency and said, I want to continue with my Russian and I want to do something. And here he is on the second row, Rick Fenwick, who helped me along with his now wife, Deborah Dawn, who met him because of the project. So we, three of us, compiled the 81 stories of Holocaust survivors who lived in Tucson. And I want to tell you that at least 78 of those stories or of those people I interviewed myself.
Thank you, Raisa, and thank you, everyone. So we have a set of very different, right, very diverging sort of literary works here. Ranging from the very explicitly Holocaust related to not really at all, right? And so I'd be curious to hear for all three of you, how do you feel? Do you feel, first of all, I guess, that your own family background as children of survivors is an important component of that work? And if so, then how do you think it factors into that or into the motivation sort of for working on your works?
Yeah, I mean, great question. For me, the book was Surviving the Survivor is really a memoir of my mom's story. It's interesting and it's really hard to put into words, which is ironic because I wrote a book. One of the things I tell people, the book is really like stream of consciousness, and people generally think I'm full of you know what when I say this, but I wrote the book sitting at a hipster cafe in Miami with headphones on, listening to Johnny Cash on a loop. And I am not a country music guy. I'm not like, it would just put me in this weird zone. And I just sat and typed. But and I never went back and rewrote a word of this book. I really didn't. And then the editor went through it and was like, wow, this is pretty good. We don't have to change it much. And she made some minor changes, and I've never gone back and looked at it since, which is weird. I don't like watching myself. I used to be on TV. My mom watches everything. She's probably watching this on Zoom. She's read the book 10,000 times. But what I think is important is that the Holocaust and my mother has literally informed every single thing I do in life. It's in my DNA, and I never knew that really till I wrote the book. And it's only after writing the book that I kind of realized, and I'm getting the chills because I grew up in suburban New Jersey, totally like in my mind in an idyllic little town 30 miles outside of Manhattan. In my house, we had a picture of a nun in our living room. And I just thought, well, every Jewish kid in New Jersey's got a picture of a nun in their living room. Never thought much of it. My dad was born in Brooklyn and raised in the Bronx. My dad was a total, like, as my mom would say, a dumb American. And no offense to Americans, someone. And, and my mother to this day is the most optimistic, positive person. Now she lost her father in the Holocaust. He was gassed in Auschwitz. He was a trained optometrist, very smart. He had an optometry store. When he got taken to Auschwitz, the first thing he said is, hey, I'm a doctor of optometry. I speak fluent German. I trained in Germany. And they said, get on that line. And his father-in-law followed him, and that was the line to the gas chamber. They didn't care, and they gassed him and then incinerated him promptly thereafter. So My mom went through that. And then I actually have an older son, I have a younger son. I have an older brother, who passed away, when he was about 3 or 4 years old, just when I was being born. So my mom endured that. And then in the writing of the book, my father gets really sick. My mom and dad were married 63 years. We still argue. Is it harder losing a father or a husband? We yell back and forth about that. But I watched her survive in real time during the writing of this book. And it is both inspiring and a little bit scary the way she is able, and we host a true crime podcast, totally unrelated, except for the title is the same. And I sort of compare my mother at times to a serial killer. And I mean that lovingly. So when you do true crime, you meet interesting friends. So one of my friends is a woman named Carrie Rawson, and her dad is a notorious BTK serial killer, find, torture, kill, one of the most famous serial killers of this last 30, 40 years. He, during the day, was an animal control guy, walked around in a uniform. He was president of the church, and his obsession was killing, binding, torturing women and wearing women's clothing after he did it, which is absolutely crazy. But he could turn his brain like a Rubik's Cube. My mother's not quite that insane. However, my mother, she can turn it on and off. I've never seen her, and it's not my business, I've never seen her mourn my father. Like, I've never seen her break down. I've broken down, not as much as I'd like to. I mean, he was one of the sweetest guys in the world. And by the way, I'm plugging my next book, Surviving the Psychiatrist, which is not written yet. But the bottom line, and again, I talk too much, is that when you're the child, and I'm sure Mimi and Raisa can talk to this, the one thing that I really think I took away is that I'm justified in being as screwed up as I am, because I'm the child. My dad was a psychiatrist, and my mother is a Holocaust survivor, and it is like in the DNA. My mother, I'll give you a very, 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 very 2-second quick story this is going to come as a surprise to Jewish mothers, but about 12 weeks ago, my neck started killing me. I've never had neck pain. And I'm 55, and I'm like, what is going on? So I went and got an MRI. I've got a compressed C6 disc in my neck and a lot of inflammation. So the options were you get a shot or you go to physical therapy. And my mother called me and said, and I quote, if you get, my mom drops F-bombs, so I'm not going to say it, but she goes, if you get that, and she used the word, that effing shot, and you end up a quadriplegic, blowing yourself around in a wheelchair, I'm going to grab the handles of the wheelchair and wheel you off the side of the mountain, which there are no mountains in Florida. She doesn't know this. She might be watching this, but I actually got the shot. And it has not helped. So my mother's right, but she doesn't even know I got the shot. So
Now she knows.
now she knows. So anyway, the point is, my mom is always errs on the side of caution. She is, the Nazis are coming is still kind of a theme that runs through her entire being. She's always a little bit on guard. She's the life of every party. She's hilarious. She's funny, but she's very sort of skeptical a little bit about the world and careful, especially when it comes to epidurals in the neck.
Okay, well, my father, the survivor, was also a psychotherapist, so we had that in common. Yes. I never thought I would write about my family. I did want to write my ever story when I came back from the mountain and I had to do my medical training, and then I really didn't think about it for decades. It's not like it was burning inside of me. And then in 2019, I left a job and sat down at my desk the next day and started writing and thought, oh, I'm finally writing my Everest book. It's based on journals. I kept meticulous journals at the time just because I was pouring out my heart, not because I thought I wanted to write a book. And then all this stuff about my family came out on the page. And I just never thought I would be writing about them. And then it became really important to me to figure out a way to make these two stories work together and to honor them in a way, because no matter how we were hurt by them or emboldened by them, they're in us, you know? And my grandmother, for example, she had to leave Germany in 1933. She was in a nice, you know, from a nice middle-class family, and she's the dancer that I became. She was a choreographer at the Berlin Opera. She was fired in 1933 for being Jewish. She put me in my first dance class because I was an infant who had full leg casts. So the subtitle for my book is a young doctor's unlikely adventure, because it was unlikely for so many reasons, my family background, and then also bodily issues and things. So I really loved getting in touch. I lost my grandmother, I was young, but kind of thinking about her and honoring her in my book. And then my father, I remember learning his story when I was very young, 6. And that's really young to learn that your father's entire family was killed. His siblings, his parents, and by the way, I'm named for most of them, which I call a heavy burden. I was named after his mother and 2 sisters. So my full name is Gilda Miriam Tsila Zieman. And I say that that is part of why I had to kind of go to extremes to figure out who I was separate from that. My father took his trauma though and became a therapist. And he was very, very into always working to make the world a better place. My memories of him are of community activism, and he went to meetings every night, whether it was Generation After or it was peace activism, or if it was civil rights. And that's why I've become a reproductive rights advocate. So I wanted to honor him. My mother was born in Israel and lived through the War of Independence and was in bomb shelters. And she and my dad divorced when I was very young. So she was a single mother raising us, the hardest working person I knew. So I wanted to honor her. So all of this came out of me unexpected. But one thing I learned about the writing process that I didn't know before I started was you have to let the process take you where it wants to go. You write and write and write and write and write, and then you figure out, how do I put this together? What's the story? What are the really important themes? It became really important to me to contribute to the literature of children of Holocaust survivors, because that is in me. And we all have things in common and things that are different. And so I wanted to tell this one little unique story.
So what is the question? Again, living in the former Soviet Union, I knew a lot about the World War II. Most of the books we read, most of the movies we watched was about World War II. The word Holocaust, I never heard in former Soviet Union. So at some point living there, I decided I'm not going to read any more books about the war. I'm not going to watch any more movies because it was very painful. And when I came here, I started learning Judaism, and the word Holocaust didn't mean anything to me at that point. Thanks to Sharon Glassberg, who is sitting right there, I took the class at Pima College, Judaism class, where I had a great teacher that people in audience probably know, Robert, forgot his name for a second. He was the educator at Anshe Israel, and he's now retired. And I fought with him with my very limited English, telling him that Russians won the war. And in his class about the World War II, he was teaching us that the United States helped Russia and helped to win, and the United States did this and that. And I was, no. Russia won the war. You guys did nothing. So my reason again to collect stories at first was to educate about what Russians went through during the World War II, Russian Jewish people, because we heard a lot, and you heard a lot of stories about what happened in Auschwitz, what happened in Majdanek, what happened with people who were hiding under the names of Christian people. We have survivors who were hidden with nuns, but nobody knew stories of Russian-speaking Holocaust survivors. And this was my first intention to do that. And this is what we started before we collected stories of other survivors.
If I can just add something to that, Raisa, there's that those who were there are the words up there, and there's a podcast of that name. And a couple of years ago, I got a call and they said, "Oh, we're featuring your father's testimony as a podcast episode." My father had been long deceased, and I said, "Why him?" And they said because his story exemplified surviving in the Soviet Union. He traversed the Soviet Union with a crazy story of survival, including, being in the coal mines of Siberia and everything else. And so, to your point of collecting those stories, they really wanted an example of that
Yes,
for
yes.
instance on their podcast.
Mimi, what words, because we can't see
It says those who were there, which also happens to be the name of a podcast. My father's episode is Isaac Zieman, and it's about surviving in the
Those who
Soviet
were there.
Union.
Okay.
So I wanna pivot a little bit and go back a little bit to the actual work of writing, of editing, and to sort of talk a little bit about what that process was like for each of you, what was easy about it, what was hard. I know we also, like, on this panel have very varying levels of professional experience and background as writers, as editors. Yeah, what was that process like? And feel free to take that as much into the emotional, metaphorical, whatever, and as much as into the nitty gritty, the day-to-day. Yeah.
Well, again, as the son of a Holocaust survivor and a therapist, and then the son of a psychiatrist, my dad, it probably won't surprise many people to know that I am an anxious human being with other mental maladies, I guess, going on. So I always wanted to, my dad, stepping back, my dad was a psychiatrist. He wrote a book in 1971 called Humanistic Psychiatry from Oppression to Choice. And my dad studied with someone who, at the time, a very controversial psychiatry in the field of psychiatry, is very controversial. He had written a book called The Myth of Mental Illness. And so for a long time, my dad didn't want to, this is 1960s, 70s, my dad didn't want to prescribe medicine, blah, blah, blah. And it goes on and on. But as a young boy, I was like, whoa, my dad wrote a book, and this is so, my dad's an author, and he's got his picture. This is when books were books. And I was like, I want to do this. And the level, and so fast forward 1999, when you're in the broadcast news business, and again, shout out and thanks to Dave Silver, who's a former sportscaster in town and a friend of mine, and helped organize this. But in 1999, I had a job during the summer working for, it's funny because I worked at MSNBC, then I worked at Fox News Channel. People think like these are your political affiliations, and they're not. But it's somewhere in the middle. 1999, I ended up working for Michael Moore, like the Michael Moore, the slightly heavyset guy with a hat. And by the way, I won his ping pong tournament. He gave me a 4-foot trophy and then asked for it back the next day. So I'll let you figure out the kind of person he was. But he did say to me, he said, make sure you document your mom's story. So that summer when I was done, I actually went to Europe. My mom, after the war, after living in the former Yugoslavia, they moved to Switzerland. So my grandmother was living in a place called Lausanne, Switzerland, like an hour outside of Geneva. It looks like a postcard. It's absolutely beautiful. And so I went there and I interviewed my grandmother and my mother's half sister, and did the whole thing. And I went to Israel and interviewed my mom's close friends and relatives. And it all like lives on YouTube. I did nothing with it basically because I was trying to become a national correspondent and I didn't care about anything else. And um, fast forward to the podcast I'm doing with my mom, and we started off, I thought I was going to be Joe Rogan. So I was like, yeah, we'll just interview random people and everyone will love it and come streaming in. And we got like, 200 views a show, if that. But one of the people that we interviewed was, and this was kind of hilarious, was at the height of the show Tiger King on Netflix. We interviewed Carol Baskin. My mom's the only American that had never heard of the show. So she's calling it the Lion King, and Carol Baskin's cracking up, but kind of broke the ice. But at the end of that show, she said, your mother is like my beloved tiger. She's an endangered species. And today, I don't know if you know, there's only 265,000 survivors left, and half of them live in Israel. And pretty much all the ones in my family are gone except for my mom. So I felt this incredible pressure because I was like, I got to do this and I have to do this now. And I was basically like almost paralyzed by it. Like I just did not know how to do it, did not know how to start, did not know how to finish, did not know what I wanted to say. And kind of just to make it easy on myself, I was like, let me drag my mom into this. And so I would literally just record conversations and I would go over for like an hour at a time. Like, we do the first part of a Holocaust story, the second part of a Holocaust story. And then I sort of loosely, the book is, has a blurb from Mitch Albom, who sort of, I had that in my mind, Tuesdays with Maury, if you know the book, where it was sort of like a combination of the story and life advice. And so once we got through the Holocaust, I was asking her, like, what do you think about kids? Well, how should I raise my kids? What do you think about it? Is money important or not important? What about technology? She's like, I have 283,000 unread emails, she's like, I'm not good at technology. But anyway, the book came together. And I tell everybody, it's kind of like an outer body experience. Again, like I never went back and reread it. I never went back and rewrote it. And it's like, I never really did it, but then I come to talks like this and I see the book and it's still really weird and surreal to me. It's very, very weird. And the only thing I'm really kind of sad about is that my dad wasn't alive to see the publication, but he knows.
My process was very different. So I did start writing out of the blue, but I immersed myself 100% in writing, signing up for writing classes, workshops, attending conferences. I joined a writing critique group that I'm still with till today. And I would wake up in the middle of the night with sentences in my head, and it took about 3 years to get a good draft of the book where I could start looking for a literary agent. And then it came out still 2 years later, and I was revising up to the last second. So I really, really took the craft seriously. So yes, I was not a lifelong writer, although, my first dream was to be a Broadway dancer, which is why I had my tap shoes on Everest. But when I went through my journals, which the book is on, I did spend a lot of time wanting to be a writer. So it was definitely in me. I was the editor of my high school poetry and prose section of the yearbook, so it was in there. And yeah, I took it very seriously, but I have a lot of self-doubt. So, but the whole book is about my doubt. Can I be the doctor on Everest when I'm just a medical student? And then when I'm writing the book, I'm like, who's gonna ever want to read this book? Can I write a book? Who's gonna care? So it was like, I was reliving that self-doubt, and it felt like another Everest. And yeah, it's really humbling now to see that in the world, to hear from readers that I don't know, like, wow, they actually pick up the book and then bother to write me. And it's gotten several awards. So it's very, very exciting, very humbling. And it's just nice to be in a whole different world than my medical world.
So for me, it was again collecting the stories that were sitting on my desk, didn't know what to do with them. I came to this museum. There were no Holocaust Center yet, but we had Tucson Jewish Museum. I came to the person who was running the museum at that time, and I said, this is 13 stories of Russian-speaking Holocaust survivors. What do you think we should do with them? And she said, oh, I can take them, I can put them in archive. And I said, no, 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 I don't want them to sit or lay down in the archive. I want people to read them, but my English is not good enough to translate them. So then I went to the Slavic department at U of A and wanted to see if anyone there would like to translate those stories, and had no luck there again. And it ended up on my desk again for a couple more years. And as I said, Rick came in and we started working on those stories. He translated all 13 of them. Jewish Museum at that time had a website specifically for Holocaust survivors. Our stories found the way to that website, but the website was closed in short time. But the website for Jewish Family and Children Services became active, and Deborah put our stories on the Jewish Family website, and we start collecting more and more and more, translating more and more. And when we end up with 30 stories on the website, I said, who is going to go through all these stories? No one. We should do something. And Rick Henrik, he actually has now 2 books that he published, but then he had only first book published. And Deborah, Rick, and I were sitting, chatting, and Rick said, oh, maybe we can put it in the book. And this is our a few months process started. I worked from 8 to 5, and Rick and I were on the phone from 5 a.m. till probably 11 p.m. going through those stories and figuring out what to do, how to do, verifying translations, doing more interviews. And our first book came out with 36 stories. Then again, 3 of us were sitting and figuring out how we want to name the book. My first idea was double high. 18 is a high, 36 is double high. And then we were thinking, okay, what if other people would want to share their stories? It wouldn't be double high anymore. So we changed the name of the book, and after the first book was published, it was 2015 or 2015, I believe. It was in March, just day before my birthday. And more people start coming up to me, to Rick, asking us why my story is not there, and we collected 45 more stories. So we have 2 volumes in English. And after both volumes were published, my Russian-speaking Holocaust survivors start, those people came to United States in their late 60s or 70s. So they never learned English, and they could not read their own stories in English. So they start coming and asking, I do want to read my story. I do want to read story of my neighbor, but I want to read it in Russian. Guess what? We have a 3rd book with 45 stories in Russian on it.
So thank you all so much. This was really, really insightful. I want, in the interest of time, to also make room for some questions from the audience. So if anyone in the audience has any questions, please raise your hand and I'll just repeat the question for our folks on Zoom.
You have to ask.
Yeah.
Hi,
Yeah.
thank you all very much. My name is Sabina Stark. I've been working on a memoir about, I have 2 parents who were of blessed memory, who were survivors. And I'm just wondering what your experience has been. I know all very different in terms of the publishing world and dealing with agents and bringing up, oh, another book about the Holocaust. It's like, yeah, you know how many books can be written about the Holocaust?
Mm-hmm.
So the question was,
So, yeah, how
experience with
What
publishing.
worked for you? What was the response?
So the question for folks on Zoom was what was each of our folk panelists here experience with the publishing side, the sort of industry side of putting a book out there.
I'll just tell you my own experience. I got super lucky. Everything I've done in life is by accident, including becoming a journalist. But you know, I launched this podcast, and the podcast started doing really well. It was with my mom, so I was offered a book deal, which is definitely unusual. The publishing industry is really a difficult thing. And I was just talking to Mimi about an agent. Like I always had an agent in news, but I did not use a literary agent. And please don't, I might take heat for this. I get a lot of hate mail on my podcast, but I didn't, and my mom did not either. So I say this jokingly, but sort of, well, seriously, too. It's the first laugh out loud Holocaust story. You know, they're so heavy, they're so difficult, you know, when you hear like, like The Brutalist just won again, you know, the Oscars, and it's so heavy, and it should be heavy. But what drove my mom and allowed her to move forward in life was a lot of humor. And I was like, I've got to reflect that in the book. And just like I wanted it to be completely honest. Like I did not want it to be, you know, this is not exactly necessarily the Instagram crowd, but I didn't want it to be like everything in life is so perfect, like that you see on Instagram, you know, the rainbows and unicorns. So it was the good, the bad, and the ugly, and a lot of cursing. And it's funny because when we did the Audible version, which we did do, and I was just telling them, recorded it at hip hop studio in Miami, which was like a whole other thing. But my mother, every time we were reading the book, but every time like the F word would come, or my mother would be like, I never said that. I'm like, I have it recorded. It's on my iPhone. I'll play it for you. She's like, I did not say it. I'm like, I have it right here. She's like, give me a minute to think of another word. And then she'd like, instead of SHIT, she'd say feces. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So it took like, I never thought we'd get through the Audible. It took 1,000 hours, and a 25-year-old like stoner pothead who was our audio engineer was like, thought it was the funniest thing. But I always tell people, like, my mom and I, when we're not presenting something, it's a lot worse than it is when we are.
To answer your question, the industry is very tough. But nowadays there's so many avenues, including self-publishing, which is more respected than it used to be. So I checked off all those boxes to try to get an agent. So I got an agent, and, you know, she found a publisher. But it was very discouraging, the industry part of it. And I'm in a huge number of Facebook groups for writers, and many of them working on memoirs. And this comes up all the time, that publishers don't want to publish memoirs, let alone Holocaust memoirs. They don't want to publish memoirs from someone who's not a celebrity or a politician. Then they want to know, what's your platform, which is the word we all hate more than anything in life, which is basically like, how famous are you that's going to sell books? His platform is a podcast, so they came to him. But without that, it's very, very difficult to get a traditional book deal. And even if you have like a little hook, like I tried saying, hey, there's no other book by a woman doctor on Everest. And the agent said, who says we need one? You know, and I'm like, wow, this is hard. But I do think that so you don't need an agent. You can go to small press directly. So there are a lot of very small presses. In my writing group, we're 4 women. The other 3 went directly to small presses. So they will publish memoirs, and that will not cost you money, because once you start self-publishing or hybrid publishing, you are paying to get published. So the small presses are an option. And then hybrid publishing is you share the costs of publishing with the publisher. And then self-publishing, you take on all the costs, but you also get all the profits. In traditional publishing, the author gets almost nothing per book sold. Yes.
Oh, can I, yeah,
Raisa, do you want to comment before we?
Our books was self-published, so we didn't go through anyone.
I just want to say one thing real quickly, and this is back to my dad. My dad studied psychiatry, trained like Mimi, he was a doctor, and his favorite slogan was Nike, which he called Nike for some reason. I don't know why, but just do it. And my advice to you is what my dad's advice would be: is like, don't think about it, just do it. And one of the things I learned in this process, every single person here has a family story. Not everyone's going to write a book, but everyone has a history. Everyone has something that they can tell. If you just want to do it for yourselves, that's fine. But if you want to write it, don't think about it. Just do it. Don't question it. It's like things become like academic, and then, paralysis analysis, and you start questioning every single thing. And my publisher said you have 4 months, which is insane. Mimi said you spent 3 years, and I probably wrote it in a little less than 4 months, because it was, stream of consciousness. But my advice to you is my dad's advice, which is why I want to write this book. Just do it.
Yeah.
can I have a mic? Can I have a mic? Hi, my name is Evie, and I'm second generation and married to a Holocaust survivor. I have written a book that's 90% done, and I really am hoping that I'll be sitting here next year. But one thing I wanted to say was that for me, it was an 18-year process. I didn't know what the book was going to be, but like Mimi, I was writing and writing memoir pieces, and it turned into something quite different. But I sent some chapters to Joel Albert, who we all know as a genealogist and who's been active at the museum. Joel happens to be the editor of Jewish genealogy, Jewish Gen. And when I sent him the chapters, he said, "Oh, well, when you're done, send me the book." In the meantime, my husband is in the process of publishing a book that's 80% his father's memoir that his father wrote in the 70s, and Bob has edited it and then added 20% about what happened after the war and about his own life. And he's having a local publisher, Wheatmark, do it, and they're doing a beautiful job, but you have to pay. So I don't know which way I'm gonna go, but I don't have 2-3 years for my book to sit on some slush pile, so I probably will pay.
Yeah, go ahead. And folks, if we could just keep it to questions going forward. Thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to add about
No, that's
Jewish
okay, Abby.
genealogy. Okay.
Go ahead.
I think history is repeating itself right now in this country. What are you doing about it? What do you think?
Do you want to take a stab at repeating that, Joel, as you answer?
Yeah, what's your name?
Miriam?
Miriam just asked or made the statement that history is repeating itself, and what are we gonna do about it as children of survivors, I think. The thing I think that we all are doing and can do is tell stories. I happen to be, I spent a lot of time, and was asked to write like opinion op-ed pieces for various newspapers, Jerusalem Post, Haaretz, and a bunch of others that I did. But I can tell you this, my mother, so when ages 2 to 5, we lived in Israel. My mom, the only thing she ever wanted to do was live in Israel and have a homeland after World War II. And she's a diehard Israel supporter. She's 85 years old. We still have a place there that they purchased in 1971. And and it's in a suburb of Tel Aviv. So she's going there in a few weeks, and I'm like, let's see how the hostage situation plays out, because you're not going if if the war starts back up. She's like, don't tell me what I'm doing. I'm going. Screw you. And I was like, okay, I guess you're going. What was interesting is this war broke. October 7th happened during the editing process of my book, so I was able to get it into my book. And look, my mom is marched in civil rights protests in the 60s. She's a social worker. She helped all kinds of marginalized people. And last thing she, and I don't want this to get political, last thing she wants to see is babies being killed in Gaza or babies being killed by Hamas on October 7th. But the one thing that she will die for, I know, well, two things, she's probably her kids and the state of Israel. I mean, she's adamant about the state of Israel and ruthless when it comes to that we've got to survive by any means necessary. She considers that her homeland. And I think just by speaking at places like this and writing these stories and making sure we have a voice, now's the time. The stuff going on at Columbia University, I'm thrilled that they're sending those guys packing. I mean, there's a fine line between the First Amendment and what they're doing. And, it's high time that they get their asses kicked out of there.
I believe everyone can do something, right? We can't all do everything. And I work with National Council of Jewish Women in Atlanta on a lot of advocacy efforts. I was their VP of advocacy. So we're advocating on bills all the time at the Georgia legislature, where I've been going down there since I moved to Atlanta in the late 90s for reproductive rights. So I've written a lot of op-eds on that topic. And, in the literary world, there's a lot of anti-Semitism now. So just even being out there as a Jewish author and staying proud of your Jewish identity, I think is important because we can be canceled just for that. And that I all learned from my father, who was constantly working on Tikkun Olam. So it's really important to me to speak out in whatever little way that I can. But I feel like even if it's really little, hopefully it all adds up if we all do something little.
I just want to add to that super quickly.
My publisher and I, he's a New York Italian, which is basically a New York Jewish guy. So he and I get along really well. But he said to me, he's like, listen, one of the reasons it's going to be tough is because people are not going to buy the book because you're Jewish and because it's Jewish themed. So what I would beseech you and your friends, and I say this on my podcast all the time, this is the most important story I've ever reported on, and it is not a financial thing for me. It is a spreading awareness, and you are much more powerful than the three of us. Share Mimi's book, share my book, share Raisa's book, go out there and say, hey, you got to read this, because there's people out there now not buying the books because it's about the Holocaust, because it's written by a Jewish person, and they're now protesting by not buying.
As Joel mentioned in the beginning, whatever he does comes accidentally, and our book came out accidentally. So the book is not the main job I'm doing, along with many colleagues that actually present here today. I'm working at Jewish Family and Children Services, and specifically for my program, we are providing services for Holocaust survivors, not only in Tucson, but in the entire Arizona. And I believe providing services to those who are in need, and not only that, helping them to come to museum to talk to the children who are 8th graders, 9th graders, to learn about Holocaust, to learn what happened with kids their age, but 85 years ago. I think it's important. And with museum staff and with Sharon's support, we have survivors here very often. Our survivors go to different schools to tell their stories. On the local level, Arizona Public Media compiled 19 videos with stories of our local Holocaust survivors. They are available, and everyone can watch them. And I think providing stories to the people, telling them what happened then can happen now, it's what we are doing.
Thank you all so much. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have. I won't speak for our panelists. They might hang out a little bit after, might not. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'll do a very quick lightning round, just if each of our panelists could really quickly say where they'll be this weekend and where our visitors can see them.
Oh, I don't know where I'll be, but I have a panel 10 a.m. And 1 p.m. Sunday. One is about nature and travel and how that changes us, and one is about trailblazing women. So hope some of you come to that.
I will be volunteering at the museum booth 225, right? I will be there on Sunday. We will have Holocaust survivors there from 1:30 till 3:30. Sharon will be there with our survivors on Saturday, and we will have survivors from, I would say, 10 to 3, right, Sharon? Yes. So if anyone want to talk to survivors, see us at booth 225.
I'm gonna be doing two things on Sunday. The first one is called The Ties That Bind, 2:30 at Koffler, room 218. And then the second one is also Sunday. Where is it here? It is called The Writer's Life. It's at the Student Union from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. 10 a.m. to 11 a.m.
Thank you so much, everyone. That's all.
Lori, do you want me to change my time?